The world of paranormal research is ever evolving. From teams to investigators, from science to tech and even spirituality, the old ways and the new ways. I'm Mike Morin, and come watch as I speak to some of the industry's pioneers, innovative, and most influential investigators. Kelly Berge, we have run full circle. Now we're back to investigating together, our team's working together, all in this glory we call the paranormal field.
Yes.
What got you into the paranormal field?
Oh, Mike. Well, I mean, actually it started for me when I was, my earliest memory as a child. Walking across the street on a beautiful sunny day in North Burnaby, BC, walking home, 5 years old, from my preschool or kindergarten. And back in those days you did that. And I just had this thought that brought my face up to the sky, and felt I didn't belong here. Literally. My grandmother was a born again Christian, and you know, put that fear of God, Jesus in you, and I just did not feel like that was real or valid, I guess, in my young mind. And again, I didn't feel like I belonged on this earth. So that was actually the first start of that journey. Moving forward, it was 10 years old, hanging out with neighborhood friends, exploring, and going to the old sugar shacks in North Burnaby, and finding a hangman's noose over some floorboards that were missing in this old barn building, and going home and going to bed and seeing a floating opalescent skull beside my bed, between my bed and my closet door. And that was it for me. That just ignited my interest, my fear, but my interest as well. More so my interest.
It hooks us when we're young, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, what was your first ghostly encounter?
So fast forward, I was in my early to mid-20s. I had just moved into an apartment, again in North Burnaby. It was one of those smaller buildings with only 4 floors and only a few suites, probably 8 suites. And the very night that I moved in, I had 2 movers. I didn't know them. They moved me in, had 1 lamp set up, and ordered us pizza. And we sat around my kitchen table and all discussed how dank and dark and dead the air was. Like, it was musty. It felt, literally, it felt dead. So we talked about that a little bit, sent them off on their way, and I went in my room and I set up my bed, went to bed and laid down and smelled sweet, sweet roses, right, like a bushel of them, right up my nose. And in the darkness of the room with my eyes closed, never had this experience before, I saw an opalescent question mark in my mind's eye. It was nothing I've ever experienced in my life. Didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden, this flurry of thoughts, and I knew that they weren't my thoughts. It was, again, I can't explain it, but it was very accelerated, a very anxiety-filled questions. Who are you? What are you doing here? What's happened to me? Help me. And this happened every single night, and it was so profound. And I never felt any fear, not 1 ounce of fear. And then one morning, a girlfriend of mine had moved in with me, my best friend at the time. She was in between places, and I guess she going out partying one night with another friend, came back, rolled in about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting up at that time in the morning and having to get ready for work. I'm in the kitchen and I'm at the sink, and all of a sudden a spoon comes arcing out.
Yeah.
Not falling out, arcing out in the middle of my apartment kitchen onto the floor. I'm like, okay. About a minute later, one of the 4-inch potted plants on the back of my stove did the same thing, the one closest to the dining room, and I didn't have a table at the time. And it came, did the same thing, arced out and fell exactly in the middle of my dining room. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not a morning person. And I got a little bit flippant, little profanity, and because now I know I have to clean everything up. I went to go to grab my broom beside my fridge, and it knocked me on the head. So I apologized for being so saucy. There was more to that story, but I think that is the story that made me realize that what I already knew was more profound and real than what I ever thought, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense,
Yeah.
which leads me to, you're part of a fabulous team called the Vancouver Paranormal Society. You had a lot of experiences growing up, then you got into the big leagues, and how did you get into a team? What made you want to get onto a team?
Well, after that experience in that apartment, so that was in my mid-20s, and life takes over. Different jobs, different life experiences. I became a mother, a single mother, and then, I don't know, my kid was 4 years old, and I moved into a basement suite in Coquitlam, behind Coquitlam Center Mall, and the very day we moved in, I knew something was up. I felt a different energy in that place. Both my son and I saw things, partial and full body apparitions, things being moved. But generally, the first experience was something was off, something was different. We were being watched. I was being watched. I don't know about my son, he was too little bit. So I connected on Facebook with a friend of mine that I knew from high school, Rhonda, and we kind of reconnected on some facsimile, and I noticed that she was connected to the Vancouver Paranormal Society, a Facebook page. I joined that Facebook page, but I joined some other international-based Facebook pages first, and I became admin in 2 of those pages, 2 or 3 of those pages. And I made some really profound connections. I guess they really saw my passion. I became admin, and many of them took me under their wing, and they, taught me the processes from their perspectives of paranormal investigation. And I was very lucky because these people that I did connect with, they had a lot of integrity. So they instilled that in me first. And that was huge for me because that's my basis as well. Anything I do is going to have integrity. One of these people, actually from Taiwan, Englishman in Taiwan, he actually sent me his WavePad Masters Edition audio software. I was like, ooh, that's so cool. I didn't realize you can get it for free. So he sent that to me, and he taught me how to use it. And another investigator from Chicago, who owns her own team, Rip Midwest, she actually taught me how to use it and how to clip audio. Well, I was hooked. So I could no longer just do my own little basement suite with my iPhone. I went out and purchased myself a digital voice recorder and some headphones, and I went out to Fort Langley Museum, the Fort Museum, and I connected with one of the caretakers there, and she just let me into places that the public isn't allowed to go, and let me do an investigation, and I caught some really cool stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. So from there, some of my fellow admins in these international teams or Facebook groups helped me analyze that, taught me how to analyze those things. That wasn't enough for me. That's when I reached out to Peter of Vancouver Paranormal Society and bought some equipment for him, met him, and asked him when I could join the team, and he said right now. And the rest is history.
Tell us about some of your investigations. Highlight your top two, most memorable evidence-wise.
So my top one with VPS was many years ago. We were investigating Camp Alexandra for the very first time. I think it's probably the very first team that ever investigated that location in White Rock, BC Crescent Beach. And so we had many investigators, some from other teams, join us. And at the end of that investigation that night, I really wanted to investigate the Columbine Cabin 5, which was reported to have a lot of activity. Reports of a young child, a boy. So I asked Peter if myself, my other co-VP at the time, and the caretaker, Steve, could end with one last session in that venue. So we did, and we got some pretty exemplary activity. So there are 3 banks of bunks. So one on the left side, one on the back, and one on the right side, and here's the door in front. The one on the side is actually just a single bed. There's a single bed beside the last bunk, which my co-VP was sitting forward at. The caretaker was on the bunk, on the bottom bunk beside her, and I was on the far left, on the bottom bunk with my back up, my legs up, because you got to be comfortable, right? So I had asked, so if there's anyone here, and with all my passion, because that's how I roll, just, you know, manifest as much energy as you possibly can, and you know, speak to us, talk to us, show yourself in shadow or light form, anything that you can do, move something, bang on something. And at that point, my co-VP had noticed a light come from underneath the door, the entrance door, and move through the room. And the caretaker had suggested that there was a shift in the energy. And at that point, as I'm sitting on my lower bunk, it's like someone was lying underneath it, and literally with intense force going boom, 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 pummeling the bottom of this bunk with me on it. And I felt it, and I sat up. But I'm one of those investigators, like, do that again. And that's exactly what I said. So we're talking about it, and within a minute, my co-VP was sitting on her little bed with the curtains on the window behind her. And as we're talking about this, one of the inner corners of the curtains went up and then down, and simultaneously myself and the caretaker pointed and shouted out, "The curtain!" So that was pretty cool. So that was very visual, it was very interactive, physical, and we caught one EVP of a little boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just told me a story that I'd like you to repeat about the haunted mirror outside. What happened with that? Explain.
So the then VPS president, so this is a couple of years ago at least, probably about 3 years ago now, and he is currently in, he actually at the time he was in Kitimat, or no, Kamloops. So he had reached out to me, letting me know that a young couple, had purchased this mirror from Winners in Coquitlam area, and had some pretty alarming activity around it. And they had only had it for a few months. And they wanted to get rid of it. So they reached out to the Vancouver Paranormal Society, to Peter, and asked if he would take it off their hands. So he had me meet with them and take this mirror off their hands and bring it to my house until he was ready to pick it up. And that could be months, which it was. So I went and I met with this very lovely, very reputable couple, very intelligent. I had no reason to believe that there was any cause for concern around manipulation or, creating a story around this piece. So I took it off their hands and I brought it home, and I didn't want to bring it in my house because I don't know what I'm dealing with. I mean, I'm not too concerned about haunted objects. However, I do have a child here, and I don't want to put us in an unsafe position because we don't know the history of this object. So I wrapped it up in 2 garbage bags, tied it up tight, and I kept it outside my sliding door, and I never brought it in my house. And it had sat there for many months, upwards of 6 months, until I got confirmation that another investigator was going to pick it up and take it to him in the interior of BC. So nothing had happened, no activity, nothing. I went to bed one night, as we all do, and I'm got to work early the next morning, and I'm watching TV, getting a little bit too late. I'm tired, and I'm curled over to one side, onto my left side, and all of a sudden it's like I felt 2 fingers tap strongly 3 times on my right shin. I was pretty alarmed. I've had a lot of paranormal activity in my home, nothing negative. Voices, things being moved, changed around, what have you, dropped, but never felt anything physical, and not like that. And this was quite alarming. I've never felt this kind of energy in this home before. It didn't feel good. So I was a little bit alarmed, and I'm a pretty feisty chick. But I was scared. So I froze for a minute, and then I called out and I said something to the fact of, whoever you are, you're not welcome. If you're attached to that mirror, you need to go back outside. You do not have permission to be here. Something to that effect. I was a little bit alarmed. Didn't really want to go to sleep yet, although I was tired. So about 20 minutes later, I rolled over and I made that conscious effort to go to sleep. And just let this go. And so I rolled over, and those 2 fingers tapped very strongly on my left shin. And at that point, I was just done. You know what? Forget you. I'm just going to sleep. Nothing ever happened after that. I did do an EVP session with that mirror 2 or 3 days later. I decided to actually, for the first time, bring it in the house, take it out of the bag, and do a session. I got nothing. At which point, another investigator had picked it up and taken it over to the interior, and apparently they got no evidence around this device, or this piece, this article.
Wow.
Yeah.
Haunted objects.
And nothing since.
No, they definitely are a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about living in a haunted basement suite.
Wow. For me, it was exhilarating. It was a little unsettled and unexpected. I had a very young son. He was 4 years old, a little over 4 years old, and we moved into this small little 2-bedroom basement suite in Coquitlam, and I was really sick with the flu. So he went to daycare, and I was home alone, having to go through all of the furniture, and I was exhausted. And I remember laying on the couch once I set it up and looking at the TV and seeing a face in the TV. Well, this is before I became a paranormal investigator. However, you know, I'm very conscious of these things, and, you know, how our mind, you know, distorts things for us, what we're seeing. But I remember feeling that I wasn't alone, and I don't believe I'm psychic, but I felt like there was a male presence, and it was a little bit ominous, a little uncomfortable. And I was seeing this face with these glasses in the TV screen, even with the TV screen off, the TV turned off, because I was so sick, I was just laying on the couch. And Mike, you might understand this, but this face, when I remember back to it, had the look of Jeffrey Dahmer. I know it wasn't, but it was those 70s, 80s eyeglasses and that haircut, right? You know, I had to question myself too. Am I actually seeing this? And probably it was pareidolia, matrixing, but who knows? I've had so much activity in that basement suite. It's not even funny. We've seen, myself and my young son saw partial and full body apparitions. My son had seen, you know, the movie Poltergeist, where the little girl is looking at the static TV screen. We would see this little boy, my son saw it first, this little boy shape with that static within, and he would run at lightning speed. And this happened for about a week. And the shape of the boy and the rate that he ran at throughout our little basement suite was kind of likened to the movie The Incredibles, and the little son in The Incredibles that ran like that. It was so weird. My son would tell me he would sing this, and then you know, I'm going to support him what he's seeing. He's a little kid, and he's got his imagination, but I'm also all about the paranormal, always have been. I don't want to take away that experience that he's having, if it's in fact true. And then I started having the same experience. The laundry room just off my living room, I'd have the door open, putting in my laundry, and I'd look towards the door into my living room, and I saw this little character run by at lightning speed, exactly what my son said he saw. And then the next time I was in the kitchen, I think it was the same day, not quite sure, I think it was the same day, same thing. And I went to check on my kid, and he's in his room sitting on his bed with his headphones on, playing on his tablet. It wasn't him. And then it stopped. We've had things pulled up, pictures of my son yanked off the walls, where that little cardboard piece that holds the nail up was ripped off. I've seen my son's posters ripped off the wall. I went on an investigation out in Mission with another investigator, Scott, and you know, the client wasn't really forthright with us, and you know, the mother had passed, who owned the home, had passed 2 weeks before. And so we came in and we did our thing. The clients, the son and the daughter-in-law sat outside with their campfire, and while we did our investigation, we didn't really capture anything, except the next 3 days I had activity in my house. Pretty profound activity, as a matter of fact. So I brought my son home from school. You know, he's got a stack of school papers, as they do. He's like grade 1, grade 2. And, you know, things that they've done throughout the day. And I took this stack And I put it on top of another stack of papers on my computer desk in my kitchen and weighted it down with my purse. I'm not the neatest person, but that, for some reason, I tidied up. It was the weirdest thing. That's probably more weird than the paranormal part. And I ended up in the living room, just right around the corner from that kitchen area. I was on the phone with my best friend, Amanda, and we're talking, and all of a sudden, I heard the erratic rustling of papers, like dramatic rustling of papers. And as I'm on the phone, I walk in the kitchen with her on the phone, and I see just the papers that I had put on top of the other stack of papers, weighted under my purse, falling and laying down onto my kitchen floor. And I'm like, oh my God, Amanda, you'll never believe what just happened. So, of course, at that point, I'm now very early on into paranormal investigation, part of the Vancouver Paranormal Society. And I'm like, put my kid to bed, and I'm going to be doing a paranormal investigation in my own home by myself. So, I sat down on my living room couch. I put up my voice recorder on the table. I put up my K2 EMF device on a rolled up cloth so it sits up a little bit so I can see the lights if there's anything that occurs. And I put my little roll of chapstick down because I want to see if they can move that. They moved those papers. They pulled them out, in fact, out from underneath my purse. So I want to see if they can roll the chapstick because, you know, that would be so much easier. Whatever was there, whoever was there, had lifted up that K2 up that cloth and lifted up to one side and down 2 feet from my face, and I had full visual.
Wow.
What do you think I said? Do that again!
Of course, yep.
And they didn't do it again. So I packed everything up. I put it in my tiny little case because I only had a tiny little case at the time. And I put it across the room beside my TV, which was kind of my computer table. Walked in the kitchen, came out. We're like less than a minute. And that K2 device that they had moved, whatever had moved earlier, had taken it out of the little case, the little pouch that I had, and put it above the case. I didn't get one EVP in my audio recording from that night. I think there was another thing that happened the next day. I can't remember what it was, but I acknowledged that it might have been the spirit of that woman who had passed away, and at the residential location in Mission, and that it was okay for her to leave now. In fact, it was probably the best time for her to leave now. Thank you for coming to visit me, but it's time for you to go now. And the activity stopped. We later learned that those clients, the son and the daughter-in-law, they only had us come out because they wanted to know where the will was. Yeah. But apparently, this mother, the woman who owned the home, she was a real prankster. She was a real jokester. And I did feel there was something there at that home when we did the initial investigation. And I feel like she picked up on the fact that I knew that. She followed me home, played around with me, just having fun. I don't know. I'm just guessing. And then left. Wow. I don't know for sure. Who knows? But that's my perception on it.
Kelly, you're one of the most seasoned investigators in the Lower Mainland. What does it take to be a paranormal investigator? Loaded question.
Well, I don't know if I'm one of the most seasoned. I would say that if we're going to talk about seasoned, I come from a place of integrity. You know, I think this field is so tainted with investigators that don't have integrity, that they have their own personal interests in mind. So we'll take it to that point. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah. I think what it takes to be a good investigator is to know what it is that you're wanting to achieve in your own heart, because it has to start from there. For me, the value and the lessons that I want to learn are so much more than what we are on this earth. It's what are the answers that we're really looking for? And for me, it's I want to know what happens to us when we pass. And the reason for that is because of my early childhood memory of wanting to know where I actually belong. So I think that when it comes to a paranormal investigator, you have to look at what your agenda is, what your intention is. And does this intention and this agenda match up with, the field itself and what we're trying to achieve scientifically? And authentically. If what you're trying to achieve is notoriety, or to be famous, or to get a name for yourself, or for whatever expectation that's personal, what are you giving to the field? What are you giving to possible other investigators new to the field wanting to step in and achieve and make a difference to this field? If we're going to make this science viable, and this investigation, this field viable, to actually come up with answers, to find answers, and to further this field, then you have to come to it with that level of personal integrity first. I think for me, that's what I want to see. That's the most important thing in this field. Your personal take, your personal integrity. It has to come with that first.
Last question. There's a lot of new investigators out there. What advice do you give people coming into our field?
Just be honest. Just be real. Get along with others. Don't taint others. Don't call others out. You can have your personal perceptions. That's okay. We're human beings. But don't take someone else out for your own personal gain. Work together. And I'm not saying para-unity, because para-unity, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack in saying this, I have no problem with that. The context in which para-unity is used and put out there nowadays is not real. It's not authentic. There's a personal agenda behind that. If you want para-unity, if you want to be a part of other teams to work cohesively, just be honest. Just be real. And work together. Don't backstab others. Work together. And don't taint clients for your own personal gain to shun other teams. And I say this because I've experienced this. So I'm going to say it. I think that's fair.
That's very fair. Thank you for the interview, Kelly.
You're welcome, buddy.